Welcome to the AI Story Narrator channel.
In the remote Arizona desert, I was initially hesitant when my girlfriend, Emily, suggested moving to her boyfriend's rustic cabin. I'd always considered myself more of an urban dweller, and the idea of leaving behind the comforts of civilization was daunting. But I knew how much it meant to her, and I was willing to give it a shot. So, we packed our belongings and our two beloved dogs and embarked on a journey to the middle of nowhere. The property was 40 acres of untamed wilderness, covered in thorny plants and rugged juniper trees. The cabin itself was modest, a single-room structure with a small loft. We invested what little savings we had to make it as comfortable as possible. At first, it was a welcome change, a chance to decompress and reconnect with nature. The wildlife was abundant, and the night skies were adorned with stars like I had never seen before. I found a sense of peace that had long eluded me during those initial months. However, our tranquil life took a dark turn with the appearance of Sam. Our nearest neighbor, Sam, resided in a ramshackle trailer a couple of miles down the dirt road from us. We often crossed paths with her, as we had to drive by her place to reach the main road. She was an overweight woman with decaying teeth, wearing dirty, soot-covered clothes. Sam struggled to maintain her home and herself, often suffering from accidental burns due to her inability to keep her stove in check. She would frequently bear painful, oozing sores on her body. My girlfriend, Emily, and her boyfriend, Mark, helped Sam with various tasks she couldn't manage alone, such as chopping wood and fetching water, as she couldn't afford to hire help. Despite Sam's struggles, she was sweet, and we grew fond of her, despite her subpar living conditions. On one occasion, Mark even ventured into her trailer to repair the stove, and he was shocked to discover approximately 10 to 15 cats wandering around, with overflowing litter boxes. She also kept a few goats and haphazardly added more animals to her already chaotic collection, including rabbits, chickens, and dogs. It was a disheartening sight, both Sam's deteriorating health and the appalling living conditions of her pets. Nonetheless, we did what we could to assist her and ensure she had enough to eat. On the weekend of my birthday, we decided to celebrate by visiting my family in a neighboring state. Although we were away for only a few days, we returned to an unsettling sight. Sam had vanished, and her entire trailer had disappeared, leaving behind a scattered mess of her belongings and trash. To our horror, we discovered the lifeless bodies of her animals, in various states of decay, from bare bone to putrid piles of fur and flesh. Some were still trapped in cages, unable to escape. It was a distressing scene, and we were deeply troubled. We searched for her family or any clues about her whereabouts but found nothing. We had no choice but to put it behind us and move forward, even though it haunted us. However, this was just the beginning of our troubles. A few weeks later, when Mark was away on a job, I was outside, playing with the dogs. Our dog, Max, suddenly began barking and growling at the tree line. When I turned to look, I spotted a tall figure about 30 yards away, walking through the trees. It sent shivers down my spine. Encounters with people were rare in the area, but they did happen, with ranchers and hikers passing through. I called out a friendly greeting, but the figure remained silent. The person's face was difficult to discern at that distance, and something about it seemed off. It just stood there, unmoving. I repeated my greeting, but still, there was no response. Unease settled in, and the longer I stared, the more peculiar details I noticed: abnormally large, pitch-black eyes and unusually long limbs. The person was dressed like a hiker but barefoot, with hair matted with leaves and twigs. Despite Max's frenzied barking, he made no aggressive move. We locked eyes for several seconds before the figure slowly turned and continued into the trees. I couldn't shake off the eerie feeling, but when I told Mark, he dismissed it as a simple misunderstanding, suggesting the stranger might not have realized he was on private property. Little did we know that this incident marked the beginning of a series of unsettling events. The bizarre occurrences always seemed to transpire when Mark wasn't home. A few days after my encounter with the mysterious figure, Mark left for work, and I was inside preparing lunch. I left a pot of soup simmering on the stove and hurried to the outhouse. Upon my return, I found the cabin door wide open, and the pot of soup was overturned. While I could rationalize the door being open, I couldn't explain the bone fragments I discovered on the front steps. My dogs hadn't left the fenced area that day, and I was certain those bones weren't there earlier. Other odd events followed. My garden was systematically uprooted during a nap, and the laundry I hung on the line was torn down. Strange tapping sounds would echo from the side of the cabin, even though there was nothing there. At times, it seemed like I could hear faint voices, sending shivers down my spine, though I never saw anyone. I kept telling myself it was all in my head, but the incidents escalated. Mark had to leave town for a job, and I was alone for the night. All was calm during the day, but that night, I was jolted awake by a loud and insistent knock 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 at the cabin door. I was petrified, and the dogs were in a frenzy. As I approached the door and inquired who was there was no response. I couldn't see through the cabin's side windows to identify the visitor. After some time, I convinced myself it was just the howling wind and rain, but my desperate need to use the outhouse eventually emboldened me. I grabbed the dogs and stepped outside. They barked at the dilapidated truck in the driveway, and I heard meowing coming from beneath it. Panicked, I ordered the dogs to cease their barking, as we had previously taken in a stray cat. The meowing was loud and pitiful, but when I shone my flashlight under the truck, I was met with the unnerving sight of a woman. Her eyes were unnaturally large, and she wore a broad, eerie smile, all while emitting cat-like meows. Terrified, I fled inside with the dogs. I immediately called Mark, who tried to reassure me that my fears were unfounded, chalking it up to a fear of being alone and an overactive imagination. I was determined to contact the police, but Mark talked me out of it, explaining that they would take too long to respond to our remote location. He promised to return soon and suggested that if I was truly uncomfortable, I could visit our neighbor, Giselle, the next morning, although her house was a 2-hour walk away. Thankfully, nothing further transpired that night or during the subsequent nights once Mark returned. Several days passed, and things appeared to return to normal, leading me to believe I had been imagining the previous incidents.
If you enjoyed the story, be sure to like and subscribe. See you next time.